They say money whispers, but wealth screams. In the middle of the Obsidian Room, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, a 4-year-old boy was screaming his lungs out. His father? Julianus Thorpe, a tech billionaire who could buy the building but couldn't buy his son's silence. The patrons were furious. The manager was calling security, and the boy's father looked ready to shatter, until a waitress, ignoring every rule in the employee handbook, dropped her tray, walked past the security guards, and whispered 5 words that stopped the entire room cold. She didn't know she was about to change history. She didn't know she was walking into a trap. Stella Miller adjusted the waistband of her black slacks, wishing they weren't 2 sizes too big. She'd lost weight again. Stress did that to a person. But she couldn't afford a new uniform. Not with the rent for the basement apartment in Queens due in 3 days, and the final notice from the electric company, currently serving as a coaster on her bedside table. Table 4 needs water. Table 7 wants the sommelier. And fix your hair, Miller. A wisp is escaping. The sharp voice of Henri, the floor manager of the Obsidian Room, snapped Stella back to reality. Henri was a man who believed that a slightly crooked tie was a moral failing. He treated the restaurant not like a place of dining, but like a cathedral where the wealthy came to worship themselves. Yes, Henri. Sorry, Stella murmured, tucking a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. She picked up the heavy silver pitcher, the condensation cooling her sweating palms. The Obsidian Room was located on the 40th floor of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The walls were dark glass, the floors imported Italian marble, and the cheapest appetizer cost more than Stella's weekly grocery budget. Here, silence was the most expensive commodity. People spoke in hushed tones, the clinking of silver against bone china, the only acceptable percussion. Until the elevator door slid open at 7:15 p.m. The entrance of Julianus Thorpe was usually an event. He was 34, the CEO of Ether Dynamics, and recently featured on the cover of Forbes as the man who automates the future. He was strikingly handsome in a severe, geometric way, sharp jawline, cold grey eyes, and a bespoke charcoal suit that fit him like armor. But tonight, no one was looking at Julianus's suit. They were looking at the small, thrashing hurricane in his arms. No, no! The scream tore through the ambient jazz music like a serrated knife. It was a 4-year-old boy, Liam. He was dressed in a miniature version of his father's suit, which was currently being wrinkled as he kicked and arched his back, his face a mask of red, tear-streaked fury. Stella froze near table 4. She watched as Julianus Thorpe, a man who commanded thousands of employees, looked utterly helpless. He held the boy at arm's length, his face a mixture of humiliation and exhaustion. Behind them trailed a frazzled woman in a grey coat, the nanny. She looked like she had been crying. "Mr. Thorpe, please," the nanny whispered, her voice trembling. I can't do this anymore. He bit me again." Julianus stopped in the middle of the foyer. "Miss Baker, we are in public. Handle him." "I quit," the woman said. She didn't shout it. She just dropped the diaper bag on the pristine marble floor. "I'm sorry, Julianus. The money isn't worth it. He's broken." With that, the nanny turned and pressed the elevator button, leaving the billionaire alone with the screaming child. The dining room went deadly silent. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. The silence lasted 3 seconds before Liam let out a shriek that actually made an elderly woman at table 2 clutch her pearls. "Sit down, Liam," Julianus hissed, dragging the boy toward the private corner booth usually reserved for royalty and senators. "Stop it, now!" Julianus practically tossed the boy onto the velvet banquette. Liam scrambled up, grabbed a heavy crystal water glass, and hurled it. Smash! The glass shattered against the imported mahogany paneling. Water sprayed over a couple at the next table, Senator Reeves and his mistress. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" the senator barked, standing up and wiping water from his lapel. "Thorpe, control your animal!" Stella felt a tightness in her chest. It wasn't annoyance. She looked at the boy. He wasn't just throwing a tantrum. His eyes were wide and unseeing, panicked, darting around the room as if he were surrounded by wolves. He was hyperventilating. "I'm handling it!" Julianus snapped at the senator, his voice icy, though Stella could see the tremor in his hand as he reached for his son. "Liam! Enough!" Julianus grabbed the boy's wrist. Liam screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure terror, and sank his teeth into his father's hand. Julianus recoiled, swearing loudly. "Damn it!" Henry, the manager, was already marching across the floor, his face purple with indignation. He snapped his fingers at the security detail standing by the entrance. "Mr. Thorpe," Henri said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage, "we cannot have this. You are disturbing the entire establishment. I must ask you to remove the child immediately." "I bought half the shares in this restaurant group, Henry," Julianus growled, clutching his bleeding hand. "I'm not going anywhere. Just get me a whiskey, and get him something to make him stop." "We do not serve sedatives to children, sir," Henri said stiffly. "Security." Two large men in black suits approached the table. The boy, Liam, saw the large men approaching and curled into a ball on the leather seat, rocking back and forth, sobbing into his knees. It was a guttural, hopeless sound. Most people in the restaurant looked disgusted. They saw a spoiled brat and a negligent father. Stella didn't see that. She stood by the service station, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked at the rocking boy, and suddenly the expensive restaurant melted away. She was back in a hospital room 3 years ago, watching her own daughter, Maya, rock back and forth, just like that, before the monitors went flat. She knew that rock. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a self-soothe mechanism for a child whose world was falling apart. "Miller!" Henry hissed at her as he passed by to direct security. "Stay at your station. Do not look." Stella looked at the tray in her hand. She looked at the security guards reaching for the screaming boy to physically escort them out. She saw the despair in Julianus Thorpe's eyes, the look of a man who could solve any engineering problem but couldn't solve his own son. "Don't do it, Stella," she told herself. "You need this job. You need the tips. If you get fired, you're on the street." Liam let out a wail that broke on a sob, sounding so small, so lonely. Stella set her tray down on the service counter with a loud clatter. She untied her apron. She walked past Henri. "Miller! Miller! Where are you going?" Henri whispered, shouted. Stella didn't answer. She walked straight into the center of the chaos, right between the looming security guard and the terrifying billionaire. The security guard, a man named Brutus, who usually bounced at nightclubs, had his hand reached out toward Liam's shoulder. "Don't touch him," Stella said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. It cut through the tension like a bell. Brutus paused, blinking. Julianus Thorpe looked up, his eyes narrowing. He looked at Stella as if she were a bug on his windshield, a waitress in a cheap uniform, interrupting his humiliation. "Excuse me," Julianus said, his voice dripping with venom. "Did you bring my drink? If not, get away from my table." "He doesn't want to drink," Stella said, ignoring Julianus and looking directly at the boy. "And he doesn't want to be grabbed by a stranger." "Miller!" Henry was right behind her now, grabbing her elbow. "I am so sorry, Mr. Thorpe. She is new. She is leaving right now. You're fired, Stella. Get out." "Let go of me," Stella said, shaking Henri off. She didn't look at the manager. She didn't look at the billionaire. She dropped to her knees on the expensive marble floor, ruining her pantyhose, so she was eye level with the sobbing boy. The room went quiet again. Everyone was waiting for the explosion. The billionaire, the manager, the security. Stella lowered her head, making herself small. She didn't reach out. She didn't try to shush him. She just sat there, breathing slowly. Liam was still rocking, his face buried in his knees, his hands clutching his ears. Stella began to hum. It wasn't a popular song. It was a melody she had made up years ago for Maya. It was low, rhythmic, and vibrated deep in her chest. Julianus opened his mouth to yell at her to stop making noise, but the words died in his throat. Because Liam had stopped screaming, the boy was still sobbing, hiccuping violently, but the ear-piercing shrieks had ceased. He slowly uncurled one arm. He peeked out from between his knees. His eyes were red, swollen, and terrified. He looked at Stella. Stella didn't make eye contact. That was too aggressive. She looked at his shoes, little patent leather loafers that were scuffed at the toe. "Those are nice shoes," she whispered to the floor. "But they look tight. My feet hurt, too." Liam sniffled. He stared at her. "My name is Stella," she continued, keeping her voice flat and calm. "Sometimes when the room gets too loud, I want to scream too. It's okay to be loud. But my ears hurt now." "Do your ears hurt?" Liam blinked. Slowly, shakily, he nodded. Julianus Thorpe stood frozen. He had spent thousands of dollars on child psychologists, behavioral therapists, and nannies. They had all tried to analyze Liam, medicate him, or discipline him. No one had ever just sat on the floor with him. Stella slowly reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a plain white napkin. She didn't hand it to him. She just placed it on the banquette seat next to him. "In case you want to wipe your nose," she said. "Snot is gross. I hate snot." A tiny watery giggle escaped the boy. He grabbed the napkin and wiped his face aggressively. Then Stella did something that made the entire restaurant hold its breath. She reached out her hand, palm up, and waited. "I make a really good chocolate milk," she lied. "It's a secret recipe. It has magic dust in it. But I can only make it if I have a helper." Liam looked at his father. Julianus looked stunned, his bleeding hand forgotten at his side. Liam looked back at Stella. He slid off the banquette. He was small for his age, fragile. He walked over to Stella and placed his small, sticky hand into hers. Stella stood up, gently squeezing his hand. She looked at Julianus Thorpe for the first time. The billionaire looked wrecked. Up close, Stella could see the dark circles under his eyes, the grey hairs prematurely scattered in his temples. He wasn't a titan of industry right now. He was just a dad who was failing. "He's not broken, sir," Stella said softly, loud enough only for Julianus to hear. Julianus swallowed hard. He hasn't stopped crying for 6 months. Since his mother died. I give him everything. Toys, space, the best doctors." Stella looked down at Liam, who was now leaning against her leg, exhausted. She looked back at Julianus, and her eyes softened with a sadness that mirrored his own. "He doesn't need toys, Mr. Thorpe," Stella said. "What does he need?" Julianus asked, his voice cracking. Stella brushed a lock of hair from Liam's forehead. "He just needs a mum." The words hung in the air. Julianus flinched as if he'd been slapped. Henry, the manager, cleared his throat loudly, breaking the spell. "Right. Well, remarkable. However, Ms. Miller, you have violated protocol, insulted a guest, and created a scene. Collect your things. You are terminated effective immediately." Stella nodded. She expected this. She let go of Liam's hand. "Here," she said to Julianus. "Hold his hand, not his wrist, his hand." She guided Julianus's uninjured hand to Liam's. The boy didn't pull away this time. He gripped his father's fingers. "Goodbye, Liam," Stella whispered. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, her head held high, even though her heart was sinking into her stomach. She had no job, no rent money, and she had just walked away from the only child who had made her feel like a mother since Maya died. She pushed through the swinging kitchen doors, the noise of the dining room cutting off. She leaned against the stainless steel counter and let out a shaky breath, preparing to empty her locker. She didn't know that on the other side of those doors, Julianus Thorpe was watching her leave, ignoring the senator, ignoring the manager, and staring at the empty space where she had stood, realizing that for the first time in half a year, his son was silent. The subway ride back to Queens was brutal. The fluorescent lights of the train flickered, mirroring the headache pulsing behind Stella's eyes. She sat squeezed between a man eating an onion-heavy shawarma and a teenager blasting music through headphones that did nothing to contain the sound. She had exactly $42 in her bank account. Her rent was $200. When she unlocked the door to her basement apartment, the smell of damp mildew greeted her. It wasn't home, but it was shelter. She kicked off her work shoes and sat on the sagging mattress, pulling a framed photo from the nightstand. A little girl with curly hair and a missing front tooth smiled back. Maya. Gone 3 years now. Leukemia was a thief that didn't care about how much you loved someone. It took everything, leaving Stella with nothing but medical debt and a hole in her heart the size of the universe. "I tried, baby," she whispered to the photo. "I tried to keep the job." The next morning, the eviction notice was taped to her door. Pink paper, the color of disaster. Stella spent the day walking the pavement. She applied at a diner, a laundromat, and a gas station. No one was hiring. By 4:00 p.m., she was sitting on a park bench in Astoria, sharing a stale bagel with a pigeon, wondering if she could sleep in her car if she sold her furniture. A black, sleek sedan pulled up to the curb. It was a Maybach. It looked like a spaceship landed in the middle of Queens. The window rolled down. A man in a suit, not Julianus, but a driver, stepped out. Stella Miller. Stella stood up, clutching her purse. "Who's asking?" "Mr. Thorpe requests your presence." "Mr. Thorpe can go to hell," Stella said, surprised by her own anger. "He got me fired." "Mr. Thorpe is aware," the driver said impassively. He extended a hand. In it was an envelope, a thick, cream-colored envelope made of paper that probably cost more than her shoes. Stella hesitated, then took it. She opened it. Inside was a check. She stared at the numbers. She blinked. She counted the zeros. $10,000. There was a note attached, handwritten in sharp, angular script. "For the chocolate milk and for the advice, please come with the driver. We need to talk." Chutawa. Stella looked at the check. It would pay her back rent. It would pay off the last of Maya's funeral costs. It would buy her freedom. "Is this a joke?" she asked. "Mr. Thorpe does not joke," the driver said. "He is waiting." Stella looked at the park, at the pigeon pecking at her bagel, and then at the car. She had nothing left to lose. She got in. The drive took 40 minutes. They left the grime of Queens, crossed the bridge, and headed north out of the city toward the exclusive estates of Westchester. They pulled up to a wrought-iron gate that opened automatically. The house, no, the mansion, was a modern fortress of glass and stone perched on a cliff overlooking the Hudson River. It was beautiful, cold, and imposing. The driver opened her door. "The library, straight down the hall." Stella walked into the house. It was silent. Dead silent. The same silence as the restaurant, but heavier. There were no photos on the walls, no toys on the floor. It felt like a museum, not a home. She found the library. Julianus Thorpe was standing by the window, staring out at the grey river. He held a tumbler of amber liquid. "You came," he said, turning around. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He wore a cashmere sweater and jeans, looking more human, but just as intense. "You sent a check for $10,000, Stella said, holding up the envelope. "I'm poor, Mr. Thorpe. I'm not stupid." "Julianus," he corrected. "And that wasn't charity. That was a retainer." "A retainer for what? You have lawyers." "I don't need a lawyer," Julianus said. He took a sip of his drink. "I need a mother." Stella froze. "Excuse me?" Julianus walked over to a desk and picked up a file. "I did a background check on you, Stella. I know about Maya. I know you lost her 3 years ago. I know you were a kindergarten teacher before the medical bills forced you to take high-paying waitressing jobs." "You have no right," Stella whispered, her face flushing with anger. "Do not speak her name." "I have to," Julianus said, his voice dropping, "because you are the only person Liam has responded to in 6 months, since my wife, Eleanor, died. Liam has been trapped inside himself. The doctors say it's selective mutism caused by trauma. He watched her die. Stella. Car accident. He was in the back seat." Stella's anger deflated instantly. She felt the familiar ache of grief. "Oh, God." "I can't reach him," Julianus admitted, looking defeated. "I'm an engineer. I fix systems. I build algorithms. But I look at my son and I freeze. I don't know how to be soft. And yesterday, you did in 5 minutes what I haven't been able to do in half a year." "So what are you asking?" Stella asked. "You want a nanny?" "No," Julianus said firmly. "Nannies quit. Nannies are employees. Liam knows the difference. I need someone who can be more." He took a deep breath. "My grandmother, Victoria Thorpe, controls the family trust. She is threatening to take custody of Liam. She thinks I'm unfit. She thinks a single father running a Fortune 500 company can't raise a special needs child. She's coming in 2 weeks for Liam's birthday. If she sees him like this, screaming, violent, unhappy, she will file for custody. And she will win. She has the judges in her pocket." Julianus stepped closer. "I'm proposing a contract, Stella. I need you to live here. I need you to care for Liam. But not as a nanny. I need you to pretend to be my fiancé." Stella's mouth dropped open. "You're insane." "I am desperate," Julianus countered. "If we are engaged, it shows stability. It shows a mother figure. It stops my grandmother." "And what do I get?" Stella asked, her voice trembling. "Besides living in a house of lies?" $100,000 a month, Julianus said. "And when the custody battle is settled, likely 6 months, a severance of $2 million. You can pay off every debt. You can open your own school. You can start over." Stella looked at the man. He was offering her a fortune. But in his eyes, she saw the same terror she felt every morning. The terror of losing the only thing that mattered. "And Liam?" she asked. "What happens to him when I leave? You want me to make him love me and then abandon him? That's cruel." "If you don't do this," Julianus said grimly, "he goes to my grandmother. A woman who believes children should be seen and not heard, and who will likely send him to a boarding school in Switzerland before he turns 5. This is his only chance." Stella looked out the window. She thought of the eviction notice. She thought of Maya. She thought of the little boy with the patent leather shoes who just needed someone to hold his hand. "I have conditions," Stella said. Julianus set his glass down. Name them. I'm not just a prop, she said. If I do this, I do it my way. No more stiff suits for him. No more locking him away when he cries. I run the house regarding Liam. You don't interfere. Julianus hesitated. He was a man used to total control. But he nodded. Agreed. And one more thing, Stella added. I don't sleep in your room. A ghost of a smile touched Julianus's lips. There are 12 bedrooms, Stella. Pick one. Then I guess, Stella said, feeling like she was stepping off a cliff. I'm moving in. The first 3 days in the Thorpe mansion were harder than being broke. Being broke was loud. It was the sound of creditors calling, traffic outside the window, and the radiator hissing. Being rich, Stella discovered, was terrifyingly quiet. The mansion was staffed by an army of ghosts. Maids who cleaned rooms that were never used, chefs who cooked meals that were barely touched, and a butler named Mr. Sterling, who looked at Stella as if she were a muddy boot left on a white rug. Julianus was a phantom. He left before dawn for ether dynamics and returned after dark, retreating immediately to his study. He treated Stella with polite distance, like a business partner he wasn't sure he wanted to merge with. But Stella wasn't there for Julianus. She was there for Liam. Liam's room was a masterpiece of interior design and a prison for a child. Everything was beige, grey, and white. The toys were wooden, educational, and placed on high shelves that required an adult to reach. On Tuesday morning, Stella found Liam sitting in the center of the room, staring at a dust mote floating in a sunbeam. He was wearing a stiff collar shirt. Okay, Stella said, clapping her hands. The sound echoed too loudly. I can't take it. This room is depressing me, and I'm a grown-up. Liam looked up, wary. Stella kicked off her shoes. We are going to break some rules, Liam. Are you good at breaking rules? Liam didn't answer, but his eyes widened slightly. Stella went to the pristine linen closet in the hallway. She raided it. She pulled out Egyptian cotton sheets, heavy duvets, and silk pillows. She dragged them all back into Liam's room. We are building a fortress, she announced. No, a castle, a fastness against the silence. For the next 2 hours they worked. Stella draped sheets over the expensive furniture. She used encyclopedias to weigh down corners. She created a labyrinth of tunnels and soft caves. Inside the main throne room, under the desk, it was dark and cozy. Stella brought in a flashlight and the unauthorized contraband she had smuggled in, a bag of marshmallows and cheap comic books. This is Spider-Man, Stella whispered, shining the light on the page. He's a hero. But do you know his secret? He's just a kid who's scared half the time. That's what makes him brave. You can't be brave if you aren't scared first. Liam sat cross-legged, a marshmallow sticky in his hand. He wasn't rocking. He was listening. For the first time in 6 months, he wasn't the broken boy. He was just a kid in a fort. The door to the bedroom creaked open. Stella froze. It was 2:00 p.m. Julianus wasn't supposed to be home. What? A deep voice rumbled from above the sheets. Is going on here? Stella poked her head out of the tunnel entrance. Julianus was standing there, looking down at the chaos. He looked horrified. His perfect architectural order had been dismantled. We're holding a summit, Stella said, crawling out, her hair messy and static charged. It's very important. High-level clearance only. Julianus stared at the sheets draped over his $10,000 Eames chair. Stella, this is... The staff will have to clean this for hours. So let them earn their keep. Stella shot back, standing up and brushing lint off her leggings. He was bored, Julianus. Boredom is the enemy of healing. He needs structure, Julianus argued, stepping into the room. The doctors said routine is essential for... The doctors aren't here, Stella snapped, her voice rising. "I am, and do you know what your son did today? He ate 3 marshmallows, he held a flashlight, and he didn't cry once. Not once." Julianus fell silent. He looked at the mound of blankets. Suddenly, a small hand poked out from the fort. It held a slightly squashed marshmallow. It was offering it to Julianus. Julianus stared at the hand. He looked at Stella. "Take it," she mouthed. "Take the peace offering." Julianus hesitated. He was a man who shook hands with presidents. He built rockets. But he looked terrified of the marshmallow. Slowly, Julianus crouched down. He took the sticky sweet from his son's hand. "Thank you, Liam," he said, his voice rough. Liam's face appeared from the shadows of the fort. He looked at his father, then at the marshmallow, and then he smiled. It was small, it was fleeting, but it was there. Julianus let out a breath that sounded like a sob caught in his throat. He sat down right there on the floor in his tailored Italian suit. Can I come in?" Julianus asked the boy. Liam looked at Stella for confirmation. Stella nodded. Liam nodded. The billionaire CEO crawled under the desk. It was a tight squeeze. Julianus sat with his knees pulled to his chest, looking ridiculous and vulnerable. Stella sat outside, guarding the entrance. "It's dark in here," Julianus whispered. "That's the point." Liam's voice was a tiny rasp. He spoke. 2 words. Julianus closed his eyes, tears squeezing out from the corners. He didn't wipe them away. That night, for the first time, the mansion didn't feel quite so silent, but the peace was fragile. Because the next morning, a letter arrived on thick, heavy cardstock. Victoria Thorpe was coming, and she wasn't coming for marshmallows. The preparation for Victoria Thorpe's arrival felt less like a family dinner and more like preparing for a tactical airstrike. The staff was in a frenzy. Silver was polished until it blinded you. Flowers were arranged with mathematical precision. Even the air seemed to be scrubbed. Julianus was a wreck. He paced the library, nursing a scotch at 4:00 p.m. "She will look for weakness," Julianus told Stella. He had bought her a dress for the evening, a sleek, navy blue cocktail dress that was modest but expensive. It hugged her curves in a way that made Julianus lose his train of thought whenever he looked at her too long. "She will ask you about your family, your education, your pedigree. We have a backstory. Stick to it." "I'm a consultant from Chicago," Stella recited, adjusting the diamond earrings that felt heavy on her lobes. "We met at a gala. I love opera. I hate jazz." "Good," Julianus said, checking his watch. "And Liam. God, if Liam has an episode." "Liam will be fine," Stella said firmly, walking over to him. She reached out and straightened his tie. His breathing hitched at her touch. "Julianus, look at me." He looked down at her. His grey eyes were stormy with anxiety. "She's just a grandmother," Stella said. "She's not a dragon." "You've never met Victoria," Julianus replied grimly. The doorbell rang. It was a deep, resonant chime that sounded like a judgment. Victoria Thorpe was 70 years old, but she looked timeless in the way a statue is timeless. She wore Chanel, carried a cane with a silver handle shaped like a hawk's head, and had eyes that could freeze water. She didn't hug Julianus. She offered a cheek. "You look tired, Julianus," she said. Her voice was like dry leaves skittering on the pavement. "Running a company is clearly taking its toll. Perhaps it's time the board considered a co-CEO." "I'm fine, grandmother," Julianus said, his jaw tight. "I'd like you to meet—" "The fiancé," Victoria interrupted. She turned her gaze to Stella. She scanned her from shoes to hairline in 3 seconds. "Stella, is it?" "Yes, Mrs. Thorpe. A pleasure to meet you." Stella extended her hand. Victoria looked at the hand, then took it limply. You have calluses. Stella didn't flinch. I enjoy gardening. It keeps me grounded. Victoria made a non-committal sound. Where is the boy? Liam is in the drawing room, Juliana said. They walked into the drawing room. Liam was sitting on the sofa, dressed in a miniature blazer. Stella had fought to let him keep his favorite comfort object, a small, worn-out velvet rabbit, in his pocket, but out of sight. William, Victoria said. She refused to call him Liam. Stand up and greet your grandmother. Liam slid off the couch. He looked small. He looked at Stella. Stella gave him a subtle nod and a wink. Liam walked to Victoria and bowed slightly, just as they had practiced. Hello, grandmother, he whispered. Speak up, Victoria snapped. Mumbling is for servants. Liam flinched. Stella took a half-step forward, her protective instinct flaring, but Juliana's caught her eye. Wait. Hello, grandmother, Liam said, louder this time, though his voice shook. Better, Victoria said. She reached into her purse. I brought you something, a proper gift, not those mindless electronics your father fills the house with. She pulled out a box. Liam opened it. It was an antique pocket watch, cold, heavy metal. It belonged to your great-grandfather, Victoria said. It requires winding every day. It teaches discipline. Liam held the cold metal. He looked confused. He wanted a toy. He wanted a hug. He got a chore. Thank you, Liam said dutifully. Dinner is served, Mr. Sterling announced, saving them. The dinner was an interrogation. Victoria sat at the head of the table, cutting her steak with surgical precision. So, Stella, Victoria said, not looking up. Julianus tells me you are a consultant. Which firm? I freelance, Stella lied smoothly. I specialize in organizational efficiency for non-profits. How noble, Victoria sneered. And unprofitable. Tell me, what do you think of the Thorpe legacy? We are an industrial family. We build the engines of the world. Do you think you fit into that machinery? I think machinery is useless without an operator who cares about it, Stella said, meeting the old woman's gaze. Julianus isn't a machine. Neither is Liam. Victoria stopped chewing. She looked at Stella with new interest. You have a tongue on you. Eleanor was quieter. The mention of the dead wife sucked the air out of the room. Julianus gripped his fork until his knuckles turned white. Eleanor, Victoria continued, looking at Liam, knew her place. She knew how to raise a Thorpe. She wouldn't have allowed this. She gestured vaguely at Liam, who was pushing peas around his plate. Allowed what? Julianus asked, his voice low. This softness, Victoria said. The boy is fragile, Julianus. I've seen the reports, the tantrums, the silence. He is damaged, and you are too busy to fix him. I have arranged for a spot at the St. Jude Academy in Zurich. They specialize in difficult cases. The air is good for the constitution. He leaves next month. Crash. Liam had dropped his fork. His eyes were wide with panic. Zurich. Away. Without his dad. Without Stella. No, Julianus said. It is not a request, Julianus, Victoria said calmly. As the executor of the trust, I have the power to intervene if the child's welfare is at risk. You are a single father, working 80 hours a week with a revolving door of nannies. You are failing. The boy goes. Liam began to hyperventilate. The rocking started. He grabbed the tablecloth. Stop it, William, Victoria commanded. Control yourself. He can't, Stella said. She stood up. Stop looking at him like he's a defective product. Sit down, young woman, Victoria hissed. You are a guest, a temporary distraction. Do not presume to tell me. I am his mother, Stella shouted. The lie came out so naturally, so fiercely, it shocked even her. I am the woman who is here every day, Stella continued, her voice shaking with rage. I am the one who builds forts with him. I am the one who holds him when he has nightmares about the car crash that you are too cold to even mention. You want to send him away, over my dead body." Victoria stood up, leaning on her cane. "You are a gold digger with a fake backstory. Do you think I didn't check? Stella Miller, waitress, evicted from Queens. You have no money, no status, and no right to this child." The secret was out. It lay on the table like a severed head. Liam looked at Stella. He didn't understand the words, "gold digger," but he understood the tone. Victoria turned to Julianus with a triumphant smile. "You see? She is a fraud, a paid actress, and you are pathetic for hiring her." Julianus slowly stood up. He looked at his grandmother. Then he looked at Stella, who was trembling, waiting to be fired, waiting to be thrown out. Julianus walked around the table. He stood next to Stella. He took her hand. He interlaced their fingers. "She was a waitress," Julianus said, his voice steady and cold as steel. "And she was evicted." "That is true." Victoria smirked. "But she is not a fraud," Julianus continued. He looked at Stella, and for the first time, his eyes weren't guarded. They were burning. "Because she is the only person in this room, myself included, who actually knows how to love my son. And that makes her more of a Thorpe than you will ever be." Victoria's mouth fell open. "And she is my fiancée," Julianus lied. Or maybe he didn't, which means she is family. And if you try to take my son, Victoria, I will burn the trust to the ground. I will sell my shares. I will liquidate the company. I will destroy your legacy to save my son. Try me." The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was electric. Victoria stared at her grandson. She saw something she hadn't seen in years. She saw a predator. She saw strength. "You are making a mistake," Victoria whispered. "My mistake to make," Julianus said. "Now get out of my house." Victoria stiffened. She adjusted her shawl. She looked at Liam, who had stopped rocking and was watching his father with awe. "We will speak again," Victoria said. She turned and marched out. The front door slammed. Stella's knees gave out. She slumped back into her chair. "You knew," she whispered to Julianus. "You knew she would find out?" "I suspected," Julianus said. He was still holding her hand. He didn't let go. "I didn't care." "You threatened to burn your company," Stella said, looking up at him. "Everything you worked for." Julianus looked at Liam, who was now calmly eating a dinner roll. "Not everything," Julianus said softly. He looked back at Stella. "Not the important parts." The moment was perfect. It was the moment they should have kissed. The air was charged with it. Stella felt herself leaning in. But then Mr. Sterling cleared his throat from the doorway. "Sir?" "A call from the security gate. Mrs. Thorpe's car has left. But there is a reporter outside." Julianus's face hardened. "A reporter?" "Yes, sir. It seems Mrs. Thorpe made a phone call before she left. The headline is already running online." Julianus pulled out his phone. He swiped the screen. His face went pale. "What is it?" Stella asked. Julianus turned the phone to her. "Scandal at the Thorpe mansion. Billionaire engaged to destitute waitress with criminal record." "Criminal record?" Stella gasped. "I don't have a criminal record." "No," Julianus said, his eyes dark. "But the article says you were accused of medical negligence regarding the death of your daughter." Stella felt the world tilt. The blood drained from her face. It was a lie, a twist of the knife. Victoria wasn't just trying to win. She was trying to destroy Stella completely. "She's using Maya," Stella whispered, tears springing to her eyes. She's using my dead daughter to paint me as a monster. Julianus looked at her, and then at the phone. This is war. I can't do this, Stella sobbed, pulling her hand away. I can't let them drag Maya through the mud. I have to go, Julianus. I have to leave. She turned and ran toward the stairs. Stella! Julianus shouted. But she didn't stop. She couldn't fight a billionaire matriarch. She was just a waitress, and she was about to run again. Stella moved through the guest bedroom like a tornado of grief. She didn't have much to pack, just the few worn clothes she had arrived with, and the photograph of Maya. She shoved them into her duffel bag, her hands shaking so violently she could barely work the zipper. Outside, the gates of the Thorpe estate were under siege. The news vans had arrived. The strobe light flicker of camera flashes cut through the heavy curtains, illuminating the room in jagged bursts of white light. Medical negligence. The words echoed in her mind, a poison that Victoria had injected into the world. It wasn't true. God, it wasn't true. But the truth didn't matter to the tabloids. They would paint her as a monster who let her own child die, then tried to steal a billionaire's son. Stella, stop! Julianus stood in the doorway. He looked frantic. His tie was undone, his hair disheveled. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man watching his house burn down. Get out of my way, Julianus, Stella choked out, hefting the bag over her shoulder. I'm done. I'm not dragging you down with me. And I won't let them desecrate Maya's memory just to get to you. They are lies, Julianus shouted, stepping into the room. We can prove they are lies. Your legal team can't fix a broken heart, Stella screamed back, the tears finally spilling over. Do you know what it's like? To sit by a hospital bed and count pennies while your daughter fades away? To be told that the treatment exists, but you can't afford it? And now the world thinks I chose that. She tried to push past him. Julianus grabbed her shoulders. His grip was firm but desperate. I know I can't fix the past, Julianus said, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper. But I can fix this. I can destroy the story. I can destroy Victoria, but you have to stay. If you run, you look guilty. If you run, she wins. I don't care if she wins, Stella sobbed. I just want peace. And what about Liam? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Stella froze. Her breath hitched. Liam has you. You know how to reach him now. You built the fort. You don't need me. I do need you, Julianus said, his eyes searching hers. I don't just need you for him. I need you for me. Stella stared at him, stunned. Stella, for the last 6 months, I have been a ghost in my own life, Julianus confessed. I was drowning in work because I was too cowardly to face the silence in this house. You came in here with marshmallows and defiance and brought us both back to life. You didn't just save my son, you saved me. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. Don't leave me alone in the quiet again. Please. Stella's resolve began to crack. She dropped the duffel bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. But before she could answer, a small sound came from the hallway. Creak, they both turned. Liam was standing there. He was wearing his pajamas, a onesie with rockets on it that Stella had bought him 2 days ago. He was clutching the velvet rabbit in one hand and dragging his blanket with the other. He looked from his father to Stella, then at the bag on the floor. His eyes were wide, filled with the same terror he had shown in the restaurant, the terror of abandonment. Liam, Stella whispered, stepping away from Julianus. Honey, go back to bed. Liam didn't move. He dropped the blanket. He took a step forward. His chin trembled. He looked directly at Stella. He took a deep breath, his small chest expanding. You said... Liam's voice was rusty, small but distinct. Julianus froze. Stella covered her mouth with her hand. "You said—" "Spiders are scared too," Liam said, the words tumbling out. "But they stay." Stella fell to her knees. She opened her arms. Liam ran. He didn't walk. He sprinted across the room and slammed into her, wrapping his small arms around her neck so tightly it almost hurt. He buried his face in her neck, sobbing. "Don't go," Liam cried, his voice muffled against her skin. "Mummy, don't go." "Mummy." The word shattered the last of Stella's defenses. It broke Julianus, too. He watched his son, who hadn't spoken a full sentence to him in months, calling this stranger, this wonderful, infuriating stranger, "Mummy." Stella held him, rocking him back and forth, her own tears soaking his rocket pajamas. "I'm here," she whispered fiercely. "I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. I promise." She looked up at Julianus over Liam's head. Her eyes were red, but they were no longer afraid. They were dangerous. "Okay," Stella said to Julianus. "Let's fight." Julianus nodded. A dark, predatory smile touched his lips. He pulled his phone from his pocket. "Sterling," he said into the receiver. "Call the press. Tell them to set up a podium at the main gate. We're coming out. And tell my grandmother to turn on her television." The morning sun was cold and bright. The driveway of the Thorpe estate was a sea of reporters, cameras and microphones. The story had gone viral overnight. The billionaire and the baby killer. The world was hungry for blood. The heavy oak doors of the mansion opened. Julianus Thorpe walked out first. He looked every inch the titan of industry. Impeccable suit, icy demeanor. He walked to the podium and gripped the sides. The crowd quieted down. "Yesterday," Julianus began, his voice amplified by the microphones, "a story was released regarding my fiancée, Stella Miller. A story orchestrated to cause pain. A story that twisted the greatest tragedy of a mother's life into a weapon." He paused, scanning the crowd. "You want to know who Stella Miller is? You want to know if she's fit to raise my son?" He turned back to the door. "Stella." Stella walked out. She wasn't wearing the expensive designer dress Julianus had bought her. She was wearing a simple black blouse and slacks. She wore no makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes. She held Liam's hand. Liam walked beside her, looking small but calm. He was holding his velvet rabbit. Stella stepped up to the microphone. Julianus stepped back, putting a protective hand on her lower back. The cameras flashed like lightning. Stella blinked, then found the lens of the main camera. She imagined Victoria Thorpe sitting in her penthouse, sipping tea, watching this. "My name is Stella," she said. Her voice didn't shake. 3 years ago, my daughter Maya died of acute lymphoblastic leukemia. A hush fell over the reporters. "The article released yesterday claims I was negligent," Stella continued. "It says I refused treatment. That is a lie. The truth is, I couldn't pay for it." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was old, wrinkled, and taped together. She unfolded it. "This is the denial letter from my insurance company," she said, holding it up. "They called her treatment experimental and unnecessary. I worked 3 jobs. I sold my car. I sold my wedding ring. I slept in a chair for 6 months, but the treatment cost $200,000, and I had $42 in the bank." She lowered the paper. A tear tracked down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. "I didn't kill my daughter," Stella whispered. "Poverty did. The system did. And I have lived with that guilt every single day." She looked down at Liam. He squeezed her hand. "When I met Liam," she said, her voice strengthening, "I saw a boy who was drowning in a different kind of poverty. emotional poverty. He had everything money could buy, but he had no one to hold him when he cried. He didn't need a trust fund. He needed a mum. She looked up, staring straight into the camera. You can call me a gold digger. You can call me a fraud. But I am the only one standing here holding this boy's hand, and I will not let anyone, not the press, and certainly not a bitter old woman, take him away from the love he deserves. Silence. Absolute silence. Then Julianus stepped forward. He took the microphone. "Victoria Thorpe," Julianus said, naming his grandmother publicly for the first time. "If you proceed with your custody filing, I will release the financial records of the family trust. I will show the world how much you spent on your summer home while denying coverage to your own employees' health care plans." The reporters gasped. This was corporate suicide. This was war. "Stella Miller is not just my fiancée," Julianus announced. "She is the future Mrs. Thorpe, and as of this morning, I have legally adopted her late daughter, Maya, into the family registry. Her grave will be moved to the family plot. She is a Thorpe, and you do not touch a Thorpe." He looked at Stella. He looked at Liam. "We are done here." Julianus turned, scooped Liam up into his arms, and took Stella's hand. They walked back into the house, the heavy doors closing with a definitive thud, shutting out the noise of the world. 6 months later. The garden of the estate was no longer manicured perfection. There was a mud pit in the corner where a fortress was being built. There was a plastic slide next to the $1 million fountain. Stella sat on the terrace, watching Julianus chase Liam across the grass. Julianus was laughing, a deep, booming sound that still surprised the staff. Liam was screaming with joy, running with the coordination of a happy, healthy child. Victoria Thorpe had never filed the custody papers. She had retreated to the south of France, defeated not by lawyers, but by the overwhelming tide of public support for Stella. Stella looked down at her hand. The ring on her finger was real now. The wedding had been small, just them, the staff, and a few friends. Julianus jogged up the steps, breathless, with Liam on his shoulders. "He says he wants chocolate milk," Julianus said, grinning. "But only the one with the magic dust." "Well," Stella said, standing up and kissing her husband, then kissing the boy's knee. "I guess I better get to work. Being a mum is a full-time job." "The best job," Liam declared from the top of the world. "Yes," Stella smiled, looking at the 2 men who had healed her heart just as much as she had healed theirs. "The very best." Stella didn't save Liam because she wanted his money. She saved him because she knew the cost of losing a child. In a world where Julianus Thorpe could buy anything, he realized that the most valuable thing in his life was the one thing he couldn't purchase: a mother's love. Victoria Thorpe tried to use Stella's poverty as a weapon, but she forgot that rock bottom is the solid foundation on which heroes are built. Stella and Julianus proved that, while blood makes you related, only love makes you a family. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button. It helps us share these stories with more people. Have you ever seen an act of kindness change a life? Tell us in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story that matters. Thanks for watching.